كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. So now today, inshallah, we will go through the rest of the discussion regarding the urf. We'll discuss the different types of urf here that Ibn Abdin mentions. The way that Ibn Abdin mentions it, I think, is a little bit not all over the place, but it's not really mentioned in a nice fashion and order. I think the way that Mufti Taqi Sahab mentions it in the Usulul Iftawa Adabuhu, his kitab, is a little bit more easier to follow because it's a bit of a tricky discussion. So he breaks down the categories a little bit better. So we'll go through this. I will explain it from there. I will also refer to the Rasmul Mufti of Ibn Abdin, and I will mention the parts that are relevant there too, the examples that he gives. Inshallah, we'll go through some of those examples to understand the different types of urf, where they will play a part, and what their remit will be in changing the rulings. So inshallah, this should seal off the discussion of urf today that we will discuss, inshallah. Then after this, we'll also move on to discussing other reasons for which rulings, the rulings can change. What are other reasons? So one was the urf. Urf changes the ruling sometimes. Likewise, we'll cover where illah, the reason for the ruling, if the illah changes, meaning the illah no longer applies, then a ruling can also change. So we'll discuss regarding illah, what is illah, how do you determine the illah. We'll discuss regarding the difference between illah and hikmah. What is hikmah? What is wisdom in a particular ruling? We'll go through some examples to make you understand what the difference between them is, how to determine that, and what kind of remit this illah has. So in essence, when a reason was mentioned to be the reason for it, if something was mentioned to be the reason for a ruling, now if that reason no longer applies, that ruling will no longer apply and it will change. So I'll give you certain examples of where fuqaha actually did that. There are many examples for this, but we won't have time to go through all of the examples. But I'm sure by the discussion that we'll have today, everyone will have the understanding of when rulings change because of that. There are two more reasons, and inshallah we'll discuss that next time, as to when rulings change because of certain factors. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now we need to finish off this discussion regarding urf, the custom. So because urf is very important for a mufti to be understanding of, because it plays a major role in many rulings. Okay, so many rulings are based on urf. To understand the urf is very important. This is why we spend a long time discussing urf. Anyway, now to understand, Ibn Abdin then discusses the different types of urf. So here we have a urf khas and we have a urf am. Urf khas is something which is established in a specific region, specific area, specific country, a specific city, or with a specific group of individuals, a specific type of people. This is their custom, or this is a custom in a particular area only. So this is khas, specific to those individuals or that group that belong to that particular area. Then you have something urf am, which is established in amongst all people from all different backgrounds, in all different cities, areas, countries. It's am, it's general. So you have this urf khas and urf am. So understand that these two types of urf. Then in terms of the actual urf when it comes about, so you have two different types of urf as well, which is urf lafzi and urf amali. So in terms of the way that the urf comes, so either it's going to be a urf lafzi, meaning word was used, a custom in a way that the word is used, So it's a verbal type of urf. Or you have practice, urf amali, meaning that's the type of practice people do. It's nothing to do with anything verbally being said. So this is what the two overarching ones are, urf lafzi and urf amali. Now each one has different rulings, that's why we have to understand it separately. So first we talk about urf lafzi, is nice and simple, very easy. So that's the way that a certain word is used. So obviously, if a certain word was used in a certain way when the nas of hadith, even the Shari'a, came about. So Rasulullah SAW mentioned something in regards to the ruling of something, and he used a certain word to describe that. But now that word means something else. In the custom, is used as something else. Then obviously that same ruling won't apply over here. So this is something vital to understand, because that urf will even change. In essence, we won't understand it to be the way. You have to understand what Rasulullah SAW, for example, is saying in a hadith, in accordance, if he's saying a word, using a particular word to describe something, you have to understand it in the context that he's saying it in. Likewise, anything a Sahabi said, likewise anything the Fuqaha have mentioned, if they mention something in a certain context, meaning they use this word because in their custom that's how this word was used, then they mean that. They don't mean what you're thinking and how you use the word anymore. Okay, so this is something that people need to understand. So for instance, here sometimes you will even see that a faqih, even an imam, a mujtahid, like Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, he'll mention something which seemingly goes against the hadith. Now he's going against the hadith here, but he's not going against the hadith here. All he's doing is going against the urf, because the word in his time is used differently. So just to give you an example of this now. So we have a hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions ar-ruqba liman urqibaha, meaning ruqba is like a life gift. So you give a gift to somebody either by saying, this is yours as long as you live. As long as you're alive, you can use this, basically, it's yours. So you gift it to them as long as they're alive. In essence, after you pass away, it comes back to me. So that's what you're saying. Or, this is yours as long as I live. And after I pass away, you have to give this to my heirs. It will go to my heirs. So this is a ruqba, or you can say umrah. Some people have mentioned, as in a hadith of Ibn Abbas, I should say. He says that Rasulullah mentioned that ruqba and umrah, which are both similar. Umrah means for the umr, for the life. Ruqba means like this until passing away. Is فَمَنْ أُعْمِرَ شَيْئًا فَهُوَ لَهُ وَمَنْ أُرْقِبَ شَيْئًا فَهُوَ لَهُ. Whoever gives this kind of a gift, then it belongs to the person who has been gifted it. And whoever is, again, given this kind of thing, then it belongs to the person who has been given it. So both hadith means the same thing, that rukba liman urkibaha, meaning the person who it has been given for, it'll belong to them. Meaning it's a full-on gift. It doesn't come back, that condition you mentioned, that after you die or after I die, it comes back to me or goes back to my heirs, that condition is void. You've gifted it to them, it's theirs. It's theirs now fully. That's what the hadith states. Now, Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, if you see in the fiqh books, he mentions that ar-ruqba batilatun, that when a person does this kind of ruqba, is batil, it's void completely. Meaning that the ruqba will go back to the person who owns it, the person who actually owned it, the person who gave it. So it's the complete opposite ruling of what the hadith is stating. So a person will think that, oh, look, he's gone against the hadith over here. But actually he hasn't. The reason being is because when Rasulullah ﷺ was saying ruqba, when he was using this word, in their understanding, in their custom, was when a person gifted something, they gave a gift, they actually gave it. So they took this thing, whatever it was, they gave the gift to the person, and they said, here you go, this is a gift for you, but only until you are alive, or only until I am alive. That's it. So that's how this gift was given. So now in gifts, in the chapter of hiba, the gifting, there's a general rule that when you make a condition on a gift, the condition becomes void, but the gift stands. The gift is not fasid, not vitiated because of some condition that was made. The gift stands. It's not like the buyur. So with the gifting, that's what happens. So therefore, when a person gave this gift, that here you go, this is a gift for you, with the condition that if I pass away or if you pass away, that it comes back to me. It's either one of the conditions a person made. Then that condition is void, and the gift will belong to the person. That's what the hadith is stating, because that's how ruqbah was done in their time. However, in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, the ruqbah, how it was done, it was a gift which was suspended on the death of the gifter. So the gifter would say, this is ruqbah for you. Meaning, what did they mean? They meant that after I pass away, this will be your gift. This is going to you. So now it was a hiba, a gift, which was mu'allaq, which was suspended on the death of the person passing away, the gifter. That's what ruqbah was. So when Imam Sahib was saying ruqbah is batil, reason he was saying that is because we know in the chapter of gifts, what's very, very common is that when you give something to somebody, verbally saying it is not enough. You have to actually hand it over. So you have to give them the gift. You have to, we say takhliya, you have to give it to them, give it over to them. If you don't give it over to them and the giftee, the person taking the gift, hasn't taken possession over it, it's not a gift yet. It's not complete. It's not complete as a gift yet. So Imam Sahib, when he's talking from the perspective of his time, that ruqbah was done like this, that is suspended on the death of the gifter, that after I die, it's yours. Now, he hasn't handed it over, so the gift is not complete. Now, when he passes away, that cannot go to that person anymore, because that has automatically already gone to the heirs. So this is why Imam Sahib said that this kind of ruqbah is batil. So you see, the word in their custom was used differently to how it was used in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now, when Imam Abu Hanifa is saying that ruqbah is void, it's because he's not that he's going against the hadith. He's not at all going against the hadith. He's in fact saying that he's applying the rules. That's the point. So everyone understands now, hopefully, that this is a urf lafzi, meaning that the word was used in their custom in a certain way, and obviously that will play a major part in terms of rulings. So what's important to understand here now is that when you have a word that's used in custom, this is urf lafzi. So now we will put the first two types of urf we talked about, whether that urf lafzi, is it am or is it khas? So if the urf lafzi is am, is general, everybody across the world uses it this way, then it will establish a general rule across the world. It will establish this kind of a rule for that particular word that's used. And if there is so for example, if a person says talaq, that's general urf in more or less all areas of the world, that is a divorce. So that will issue a clear divorce. And if there is a wording urf lafzi which is khas, meaning it's only used in that way in a specific area or specific language or specific people, a specific group of people, then it will establish a khas ruling only, a specific ruling to those people only. When they use that word in that way, this is what's meant. It won't establish that same ruling everywhere else, because the other people don't use that word in that particular way. So an example of this was in the hadith where Imam Sarakhsi actually mentions this from Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu, who was asked a question by somebody that a person from the tribe of Banu Rabah, he made a vow or something, he made necessary upon himself a badana. A badana is a large animal, cow, cattle, he made in essence cattle or a camel or something like that. So he just said, any of these big large animals which have 7 shares in there, that is a badana. So he made this badana necessary upon himself. So then somebody asked the question, will a cow suffice? If he sacrifices as cow or he gives a cow, will that suffice? So Abdullah ibn Umar first asked him, where is this person from? Where is this person who made this oath where is he from? So he says that he's from Banu Rabah. So then Abdullah ibn Umar said that, where do the Banu Rabah, when did they start acquiring cows? Yeah, they acquire and they keep camels. That's their custom. So when he said Badana, in their custom, it would have been a camel. That's what he meant. So he's going to have to give a camel. So you see, the word, according to their custom, was taken into consideration. The urf khas, urf lafzi, but khas. And a ruling was determined in accordance to that. So this is the point here. Very easy, simple. Urf lafzi, if it's khas, it will establish a khas ruling, specific ruling to those people. If it's urf am, it will establish a urf lafzi, which is am, will establish a general rule across the board generally. Now, moving on, the more difficult and longer discussion is in regards to urf amali. So we had the urf lafzi, which was a nice and simple discussion. It breaks up into two: urf lafzi, which is am, and urf lafzi, which is khas. Now we have urf amali. Urf amali, in other words, is ta'amul. We call it ta'amul, meaning the custom of the people. Generally, when urf is mentioned, just without anything, this is what's generally meant. The aada of people, the ta'amul of people, the urf amali of people. Now, obviously, this will also split up into two, just like the other one, meaning urf amali, which is am, and urf amali, which is khas. But their rulings are slightly different. So this is something now to really bear in mind and take into consideration. So, firstly, understand something very easy to understand, that if the urf, it doesn't matter if it's urf, meaning if it's a urf amali, which is am or khas, if the urf amali, if it goes against the nas of Shari'a, it goes against the textual based evidences, kitabullah or sunnah, it goes against it. And because of, if you were to practice upon the urf, you would be leaving the nas. There would be tarkun nas, we call it. Tark, leaving the nas. Then, without any doubt, this urf is going to be discarded. For example, if there is a urf, we've discussed this before, if there was a urf in the people, like there is, that they practice riba, they deal with interest-based dealings, or that, for example, they drink alcohol, or they buy and sell alcohol, or they wear silk, or men wear gold, right? Men are wearing silk like this. There's an urf of this. That urf will not be taken into consideration. Okay, that custom will not be taken into consideration in order to give allowances of certain things. Nope. This is because if you do take that into consideration, you're going to be leaving the nas of Sharia, the clear text of Sharia. You're going to be leaving that, and that's not going to be allowed. Now, so once that's understood, that's something we did discuss before, so it should be quite easy to now build upon that. Now, what if by considering this urf, you are not going against the full nas? You're not going to go against the entire nas here. But what will happen is you're going to end up making that nas, you're going to make it specific. You're going to do, this is a bit trickier now, so hopefully by the end of this discussion, you should understand it. Just follow the chain of thought, inshallah, okay? So you are doing just what we call takhsis of athar, or takhsisun nas, or tarkul qiyas. Two things, right? Two things that could be done, okay? There is takhsisul athar or takhsisun nas we're making that nas that the nas is talking about, we're going to make that specific. We're going to make it khas. Or we're going to do tarkul qiyas, meaning there was a qiyas analogy done on the nas, and that analogy that was done on the nas, that is taken away. We're not going to accept that qiyas, basically. We're going to leave it aside because of urf. So can you do that? So in general, you can do that when there is urf am. So urf am is able to do both things. The hukam, the ruling of urf am is what? That it can do takhsisun nas and it can do tarkul qiyas. These two things. Okay, and the ruling of urf khas is that it can't do any of them. It can't do the tarkun nas, and he can't do also, sorry, not tarkun nas, tarkul qiyas, sorry, and he can't do takhsisun nas. He can't do takhsisun nas, and he can't do tarkul qiyas. That is not allowed when it's a urf khas. So in actual fact, the urf khas doesn't allow you to do anything in this particular matter when it's a urf amali as such. But there is a bit more detail to it as we go along, inshallah. Hopefully we'll be able to understand in the next few moments. So we give examples now to make you understand what's happening here. So now let's take a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a person is not allowed to do bay of ma'doom, okay, meaning something which is not found, something which is not there yet, something which doesn't exist yet. Bay'ul ma'doom is mamnu', is prohibited because there's a hadith against it. So the hadith, this permits that, right? Doesn't allow that. But a person does a contract of manufacturing, so we call it istisna. For those people who've done buyu will understand the bay'ul istisna, meaning you are telling somebody to manufacture something for you. Simple example of it is like when you go to the tailor, they will tailor clothing for you, which is not even existing yet, because they're gonna, size you up, measure your body, measure your everything, and then they're going to now make the clothing according to that measurement. So the clothing doesn't exist yet, but you're going to do a trade on that already. So you're allowed to do that, right? That's allowed to be done because that's how it was done from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and before that even. So istisna, manufacturing contracts where there was something, that the product that you're in essence trading upon doesn't even exist yet. They're going to make that for you. So armor was made like that. So many other things were made like that. Yeah. So you place your order, and they'll make it for you. And then once they've made it, then you go collect it, or they will deliver it for you. So that was done. This is called istisna in a nutshell. Obviously, there's certain conditions for it to be istisna, but the point is that when it becomes a bay'ul istisna, the bay'ul istisna goes against the main principle, which is bay'ul ma'doom, that you're not allowed to do that. But here you're allowed to do it. Why? Because that general text of Shari'a, which is the hadith, the bay'ul ma'doom is mamnu', is prohibited. That is general. That still applies everywhere else. But just here, in this matter, it won't apply. So we're doing takhsis of that nas there, right? We're saying that nas applies everywhere else, is khas, meaning it's specific everywhere else, but not here. It doesn't apply here. Why doesn't it apply here? Because from the time of the Prophet ﷺ till now, till today, everybody in the world does it. So it's a urf, which is amali, but it's urf amali am. It's general. Everybody does it. Everyone's been doing it. There's never been a prohibition against it. We don't find any hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ prohibiting against it. So we now see that here we have allowed the urf am to be able to effect this ruling of the general hadith and leave, you can say, we can do tark of the qiyas, because why would istisna be disallowed? Because we're going to have to analogize if it was disallowed. Why would it be disallowed? Because the analogy suggests that here there is we are doing what? We are doing bay'ul ma'doom, right? And that would be qiyas on this hadith here that says bay'ul ma'doom is prohibited. So here there is bay'ul ma'doom, so we're analogizing on that hadith. Or we're doing, in essence, we're doing tark, we're leaving that hadith in a khas situation. We're doing takhsis of the nas there. So that's what it means by takhsisul nas, or we're doing tarkul qiyas. We're leaving the analogy in this particular scenario, and like that we're allowing the this particular urf am to be able to do amal here, urf amali, which is am. So that's an example of this. Likewise, if we do one more example, this will hopefully make it very clear. So there is this a famous example, very famously, that's why I do this particular one, that a hadith mentions that a person is not allowed to do, the qafizu tahan mas'ala is called, the qafizu tahan, which is that in the hadith it mentions that when a person takes some grain, qafiz is a measure, so it takes a certain grain amount to the miller, to the person who mills the grain, and you tell them, you pay them that look, I'm giving you this many, this much grain, and you give me, you make it into what do you call flour for me. You grind the seed, the grain, make it into flour, and you take one qafiz from it. You take one measure from it. So a qafiz, like for example, you take a kilo from it. That's yours. That's your payment. So your payment is the one qafiz. So the tahan is the miller. So that person will be taking payment from there. Now that in the hadith is prohibited. That's not allowed. So the hadith says this is not allowed. So now different people have come up with, different scholars have come up with different reasons as to why it's not allowed. Some say that because he is working in his own thing. He's being paid from something that he is working in. All right, so things like this. So different things. So now, then what came along, different similar masail, similar rulings came along in the time of the people. So in Balkh, for example, right, there was a custom that a person would go to the weaver and give them a yarn of, let's say, a certain material, cotton, for example. You give him and you tell that weaver that, can you spin this into thread for me? Spin it into, spin this yarn for me. And your payment will be 1/3 of it, for example. A third of it is yours and the rest of it is mine. Okay, that's your payment. So now, if we see it's a similar ruling to the qafiz of tahan mas'ala, which is prohibited in the hadith. So here, because it's not qafiz tahan here, it's a separate mas'ala, it's to do with spinning the yarn into, the weaver telling him to spin it into yarn. So now that is what, spinning the yarn, that is we're saying that if we're saying not allowed, we're doing qiyas on that hadith, right? We are making the hadith of qafiz tahan khas to the qafiz tahan case only. We're saying that's not allowed in the qafiz tahan, but that is takhsis of the nas we're doing. And we're saying that doesn't apply over here, right? So now if this spinning of the yarn becomes a custom worldwide, urf am, amali urf am, then the scholars would have said that this is going to be allowed. We're going to allow leaving the, we're going to say takhsis of the hadith, the athar, or we're going to do tark of the qiyas that we're trying to do on here. We'll leave that. We don't do the qiyas. We're not allowed the analogy on this mas'ala here because there is urf am of it. So that's what would have happened. So the mashayikh, the scholars of Balkh, they did that. They allowed it for their people because they saw in their country it was very much a custom. So they understood that this is a urf now. So they allowed the people to do this. They gave fatwa based on this. Now, obviously, many people objected later on that this was only a custom in Balkh. This wasn't a custom worldwide. So this was an urf khas only. And despite that, they gave fatwa. So some then interpreted that this was because they were mistaken. Others interpreted that no, because they understood that urf khas can also do that. So now there's a difference of opinion regarding that. That's why this discussion becomes very long, a lot more complicated. You can understand now if we go into all these complexities. But we don't want to go into there. We just want to understand the general rule here. We understand. Now, just to seal off this discussion, making sure we understand that now that doesn't mean we're allowed to do tark of the nas. We can do takhsisun nas, but we can't do tarkun nas. We can't leave the nas. What that means is if there becomes a custom, in even worldwide custom, right? If there becomes a urf am, that everyone starts to deal with the qafiz tahan, yes? Everyone's doing this qafiz tahan, you're doing this, milling, and you're paying the person from the actual the grain that they're milling into flour for you. If everyone did that in the world, still we won't allow that. We will not allow that. Why? Because this then means that you are doing tark of the nas there. You are going against the direct hadith. Now you can't do that. So you can't do tark of the hadith, but what you can do is do takhsis of the hadith. You can make the hadith khas to the qafiz tahan, say that, that applies to the qafiz tahan only. That doesn't apply over here, for example, because there's an urf for it. But like I said to you, there has to be urf am for it, for you to be able to do that, because only urf am has the remit to be able to do takhsis, I keep saying it, takhsis of nas, or tark of the qiyas that you're doing, the analogy you're doing on the nas. Hopefully this has been clear. For those people who haven't understood it, I would advise listening to this again, because this was very loaded, very heavy. I get that, but this is the discussion in regards to urf. Now, after having understood the urf discussion, the urf was a major discussion because we understood that urf is something which, when it changes, the custom changes, the ruling can also change. But there are some other aspects or other things to take into consideration. When they change, the ruling will also change. So there are three more things, and which Ibn Abidin doesn't mention. He mentions it here and there. He mentioned it in the last discussion for those who are keen readers, just in passing. But Mufti Taqi Sahib, in his Usul al-Ifta wa Adab, who discusses it at length. So we'll just quickly in this session just summarize what he's discussed. So firstly, the ruling changes because of the illah changing, the reason changing. So if a ruling was based on an illah, on a reason, when that reason, that illah no longer applies, the ruling no longer applies. So ruling can change because the illah changed. Now what's very important here to understand is that what is an illah? Illah is the reason for that ruling. That ruling is contingent on that. Okay, that's very important to understand the difference between illah and the hikmah. So many people confuse this, and then they go into becoming maqasidis, as you call them. You may have heard this term, people who look at maqasid of Shari'a, that the purpose of Sharia ruling is this. So, you know, they look at hikmah, they're looking at the wisdoms. But wisdoms are not what Shari'i rulings are based on. The illah is what the ruling is based on, the reason for what the ruling is based on, not the hikmah, the wisdom of it. So to understand the difference between them, let's use some examples. So for example, everybody accepts that drinking alcohol is haram. It's in the Quran. That's the ruling. That's the hukm. The hukm is drinking alcohol is haram. The illah for why this is haram is because it's an intoxicant. It's an intoxicant, so it is haram. That's it. That's the illah. Now the hikmah behind it is so that a person doesn't lose their senses, their sanity. A person doesn't lose their sense, in essence, in being able to be, their aql is not I would say, taken away. So it's not clouded. So that's the hikmah behind it, so that a person doesn't lose their senses. Simple and straightforward. Now, if, for example, now we understand the hukm is haram to drink alcohol, the reason is because it's an intoxicant. The hikmah is so that you don't lose your senses. So now if a person comes out and says that, okay, you know, I don't get drunk by this many units of alcohol, I don't lose my sense. So that means this many units of, up to this many units of alcohol would be halal for me, would be permissible for me, because the hikmah behind the ruling is that so that you don't lose your senses. So I don't lose my senses when I drink this much. So then if you base the ruling of alcohol being haram on the hikmah, you would say for this person, drinking this much alcohol is permissible then. But we all know that this is not the case. Okay? Obviously, any amount of intoxicant will be haram. So that's an example, for instance. Another example to make this even more clear. So if we see that salat, the prayer, is shortened when a person goes for journey, when a person travels. So when a person is a traveler, you now pray from 4, you pray 2, right? You pray 2, you pray half. So now the reason mentioned in the Quran is because of difficulty. Yeah, the difficulty that there is there, that's the hikmah, right? And the illah for why you do qasr, in essence, you shorten the prayer, is because you are musafir, you're a traveler. So the traveler, being a traveler, is the reason for which you do the shortening of prayer. And the hikmah behind it is why, because there's going to be difficulty in the journey. Remember, illah is always the thing that leads to the outcome, meaning it always leads to the outcome, right? You can't have a illah which is like, okay, sometimes because of this the hukam will happen, and sometimes because of the hukam won't happen. If it's a sometimes, then that's not a illah. I like to explain it very simply that if, for example, let's say a person drops their phone. If you drop your phone, the screen cracked. What's the illah for why your screen cracked? If you think that it's dropping the phone, then that's wrong. Why? Because every time you drop your phone, the screen doesn't crack. It's not like you drop your phone and it'll always crack. So that can't be the illah, right? The illah is that if this particular part of the screen hits the ground, that surface that is this hard, then it will always crack. So the illah has to be something which always leads to the outcome. It can't be something which is sometimes. That's why the point over here, some people may be finding it tricky, that how do you know that the illah is the fact that you are you are in journey? Why is it not the fact that there's difficulty? The reason is because in every journey there's not difficulty, right? So the point is that the illah is that you are in a journey. So as you are in a journey, you have to do qasr now. That's it. That's the ruling. Well, that's according to the Hanafis. You have to do qasr. You have to do shortening of prayer. And the hikmah behind it was, why did we allow it? The hikmah is that there is generally difficulty in journey. So that's the hikmah now. Hopefully people can differentiate now. So now if, for example, a person is traveling first class, they've got so much comfort, more comfort than even at home. Does that mean now that in this journey, because there is no mashaqqa, no difficulty, the hikmah is not there, so that means the ruling won't be found, you don't shorten the prayer? That's not the case. The fact of the matter is that because the illah is found, which is that you are in journey, you will still do qasr. You will still shorten the prayer. Does that make sense? So the point is that the ruling is based on illah, not the hikmah. Otherwise, if you base rulings on hikmas, then you are changing the whole of Shari'a. You can make riba permissible. You can make drinking of certain amount of alcohol permissible. You can make all sorts of things permissible, right? You can make zina permissible. You can make, whatever. So many things that Shariat has clearly mentioned haram. You can make so many things permissible. So this is why it will change the whole of Sharia if you start basing rulings on hikmah. So rulings are based on illah, not hikmah. Okay, a very real life example of this, day-to-day life, for those people who drive will understand that if, for example, let's say there's a traffic light system. The traffic light system, when it shows a certain color, there's a ruling. So when it shows green, the ruling is you go. When it shows red, for example, it means that you stop. That's the ruling. So the ruling is you stop. When it's red, you stop. And what's the illah? What is the reason for why you stop? Because you can see red there. Seeing red, when you see red, the traffic light is red, you will always have to stop. So the illah is that it's red. What's the hukam? You have to stop. Illah is that it's red. Red, that means the hukam is you have to stop. So now you stop. That's the illah. Illah is red, hukam is stop. Now, what's the hikmah behind it? Why is it that you have to stop when it's red? To manage the traffic, to prevent an accident happening, right? That's the hikmah. So now if a person in the middle of the night comes to a traffic light and it shows red, and they see, there's no cars on the road, I'll take the traffic light, I'll take the red light, it's fine. For me, I can pass the red traffic light. Is that person allowed to do that is the question. Obviously, by law, the person is not allowed to do this. If the police see this person, they will be stopped, they will be penalized, right? No person will be allowed to take that red traffic light, to pass the red traffic light. It doesn't matter if there's no cars coming. Why? Because the ruling of stopping is not based on the hikmah, is based on the illah, that it's red. It doesn't matter that there is no cars coming and there was no accident that took place. That hikmah is not the ruling. The ruling is not based, the ruling of stopping is not based on the hikmah. So I'm sure we can understand now in exactly the same way, Shari'i rulings are not based on hikmah, is based on illah. So this is very important to understand, that when we have rulings based on an illah, then when the illah changes, then the ruling can also change. So there are many examples for this. So for instance, just to give an example, there are many let's say for example, the fuqaha mentioned, the scholars mentioned that you can't give a ruling based on writing. Somebody's writing, if there's writing, ruling cannot be based on that. That's the general rule, because khat yushbihul khat, because handwriting, writing can be copied, signatures can be copied, documents can be forged. All of this can be happening. That's why they ruled that you cannot base rulings on a document, written piece, or anything. You need witnesses. But now, as time progressed, and we see that documents, official documentation, government documentation, that cannot be forged, right? There's a trail, there's record serial numbers, there's records of this being entered into the official database and things like that. So now that writing, which there is no chance of it being forged, right? And there's very less chance, you can say, of it being forged or anything. We can base rulings on that now. So here we've overturned the ruling of what the fuqaha originally mentioned. Why have we done that? Why have the later scholars done that? Because they saw that the fuqaha, the original fuqaha who said that you can't base rulings on this, they did it because this was because they saw that there was chances of forgery and everything. But now those chances of forgery and everything no longer apply. The illah is no longer there. So they said that you can base rulings on this now. So like this, you see there are many rulings in this manner. If the illah is clearly mentioned, or if the illah is derived, then it depends how the illah is. Then a ruling can change if the illah changes. So this is something also to take into consideration when giving rulings. Then Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. So Alhamdulillah, today we finished a very complex discussion of urf, where we discussed that urf is generally of two types, the urf am, urf khas. Then we have the urf lafzi, which is the wording, the wording, the way that wording is particularly used. And there we had two offshoots. We have a urf lafzi, which is am, which will establish a general rule all across, all across the regions, wherever it is used like that. And urf khas, which is only in specific region or specific people, and they only apply the ruling in amongst them the way that that wording was used. So this is urf lafzi. Then we went on to urf amali, which is also known as ta'amul, the famous type of urf, because this is the more complex discussion. So urf amali is where this is also split into two. You have the urf amali, which is am, and urf amali, which is khas. So urf amali, which is khas, doesn't really allow us to do anything. It doesn't allow us to be able to give a ruling, not even meaning it doesn't allow us to go against to do the takhsis of the hadith, of the nas, of the athar, nor does it allow us to do tarkul qiyas. What it does allow us to do, though, the urf khas, what it will allow us to do is, if there's nothing mentioned in the nas against this, then you can use that urf to give a ruling. That we discussed in the previous lessons, that the remit of urf, what is the remit of urf? How does it allow you to change, or how does it allow you to give a ruling based on a certain urf? So we have to take the urf into consideration, but that's if there's no going against the nas because of it. Likewise, you're not going against the texts of the fuqaha unless that was based on their urf, and now the urf has changed, even if it was khas, right? So urf khas will do something, but not what we're talking about when we come in relation to urf am. So urf am, we discussed the general am urf, which is the urf amali am, when it's like this. So this one, we will be allowed to do what? We'll be allowed to do two things. We'll be allowed to do tark of qiyas, and we'll be allowed to do takhsis of nas. And I gave you the example of this through the Qafizut Tahan, where we do takhsis of it. That applies only there, and it doesn't apply in the weaving. The weaver is being told to to spin the yarn. Okay, if you tell him to spin the yarn for you, then you give him some of that spun yarn as payment, then that's okay, because the Mashayikh of Balkh allowed it. Okay, some scholars later had a dispute regarding this, that no, that shouldn't be allowed because that's not urf am. But anyway, if it was an urf am, that would have been allowed. We can understand the urf am's remit, but you can understand here there will be a lot of ikhtilaf, whether it's urf am or not, and things like this. Now, to understand another thing over here is, in conclusion, the urf am, it will not be considered when a tarkul nas is happening. If you do tarkul nas, like for example riba, because of nas, you can't do tarkul nas here, and it will only be considered where takhsisun nas is happening or tarkul qiyas is happening on the nas. That's urf am. And urf khas is not considered in either place, whether it's the takhsisul nas or tarkul qiyas. Urf khas cannot do that. And it will only be considered when it goes, like I said to you, if it goes against a transmission of the madhab. For example, the faqih mentioned something, but that faqih mentioned it based on his urf, and now you establish that in our urf that doesn't apply, then that ruling won't apply to us. So that's that. That then brings us nicely on to the discussion of the ruling changing based on illah changing. So it's similar that we talked about illah, we talked about hikmah, and the difference between them, and that the ruling will be based on the hukm. Sorry, the ruling will be based on the illah and not the hikmah. So if the illah no longer applies, then the ruling will no longer apply, and regardless of the hikmah applying or not. So this is something that we've done. Hopefully people have understood this, inshallah.